Humankind needs to take lesson from its past in order to build a new and better tomorrow. One lesson learned is that to prevent our violence-ridden history repeating itself, the value of peace, non-violence, tolerance, human rights, and democracy will have to be inculcated in every man and woman, young and old, children and adults alike. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Jufali Aloy Jamalol, and welcome to the Peace Education Summary and Analysis Discussion. In this video, we'll be talking about different chapters from 1 to 12. In chapter 1, we will be talking about the holistic understanding of peace and violence. Chapter 2, we'll be talking about the peace education and transformative education. Chapter 3, we have the comprehensive scope of peace education. Chapter 4, we have the spiritual and faith traditions as resources for peace. Chapter 5, we have upholding human dignity. Chapter 6, we have challenging prejudice and building tolerance. Chapter 7, we have promoting nonviolence. Chapter 8, we have challenging the war system. Chapter 9, we have resolving the transforming conflicts. Chapter 10, we have sharing the earth's resources. Chapter 11, we have caring for the earth. And lastly, we have chapter 12, we have cultivating inner peace. So for the chapter 1, peace is not necessarily a lack of conflict or nonviolence. Peace means that all for MS is inequality are eradicated. John Galton states that peace, not only personal or direct, but also systematic or indirect. It is the absence of aggression. So, which means that it doesn't mean that a particular community or society is peaceful. Conflict doesn't exist anymore. It really do exist, but it's not that so aggressive. The systematic violence manifestation are the highly unequal distribution of wealth and resources. In chapter 1, we have the so-called as culture of peace. Before discussing it further, let me just remind you that all of these lessons, all of these topics that we will be talking about are the most important things that I found in this PDF, in this learning material. So I hope this will be very much resourceful. Let's talk about the culture of peace. The UNESCO Declaration tells us that since war began in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defense of peace must be built. UNESCO started the Culture of Peace program in line with its mandate and saw the program's potential to be a global movement. The Declaration on the Culture of Peace was finally adopted in 1999 by the General Assembly of the United Nations. The Declaration United Nations in 1998 states that a culture of peace reflects and inspires a set of values, attitudes, traditions, modes of behavior, and ways of life. So there are things that we have to remember about the culture of things. First, respect for life and for all human rights. Second, we have the rejection of violence in all its forms and commitment to the prevention of violent conflict by tackling the root causes through dialogue and negotiation. So we'll be talking about it. Third, we have the commitment to full participation of the process of equitably meeting the needs and present and of the needs of present and future generation. Fourth, we have the promotion of the equal rights and opportunities of women and men. Fifth, you have the recognition of rights of everyone for freedom of expression, opinion, and information. And lastly, we have the devotion of the values of equality, justice, democracy, peace, solidarity, collaboration, pluralism, diversity of culture, dialogue and understanding between nations, national, religious, cultural, and other classes, and between individuals. Moving on to the cultural traditions, the Greek concept of eirene implies harmony and justice as well as the absence of physical violence, similarly to the Arabic salam and the Hebrew shalom, embrace well-being, wholeness, and harmony with oneself. The holistic view of all the holistic view is also derived from certain ethical, cultural, and historical roots that have influenced in today's peace thinking. So that is all for the chapter 1. So let us now move on to the chapter 2, which is the peace education as transformative education. In this chapter, we'll be talking about the essence of peace education, why educate for peace, education for peace, list of knowledge areas, skills, and attitudes, values. Peace building refers generally to the long term project of building peaceful communities. Peace education is therefore both a significant peace building strategy and an effective way of preventing violent conflict. So, what do we mean by peace education? Peace education seeks to transform the mindset, attitudes, behaviors that have created or exacerbated violent conflicts. It seeks this transformation by building awareness and understanding, developing concerns. It will be enable the people to live, relate, and create conditions that actualize nonviolence, justice, and environmental care. So why do we have to be educated for peace? Peace education seeks to transform the present human condition by changing the social structure and patterns of thoughts that have created it. In the Philippines, the Center of Peace Education in Mariam College and other groups have expressed that educating for peace is both a practical alternative and an ethical imperative. This is a springboard to exploring the sense of true human security, which derives from the fulfillment of both fundamental needs and greater human needs. So now let's move on to the knowledge and content areas. Number one, we have this holistic concept of peace. It is important that students understand that peace is not just the absence of direct or physical violence, but also the presence of conditions of well being, cooperation, and just relationship in the human and ecological spheres. This perspective will help them analyze peace issues in an integrated way. Number two, we have the conflict and violence. Conflicts are a natural part of person's social life, but they become problematic but they become problems of violence depending on the methods of conflict resolution used. Students can study the problems of violence in various levels from the personal to the global and including direct, structural, social, cultural, and ecological violence. They can also examine the roots and consequences of violence. Third, we have these some peaceful alternatives. We've got a lot of alternatives in the modern world. Firstly, we have these disarmaments. When we say disarmaments, learners can be introduced to the goal of abolishing war and reducing global armed forces and armaments. It is good for them to see the folly of excessive arms and military expenditures and the logic of reallocating resources towards the fulfillment of next we have the non-violence. Learners can study the philosophical and spiritual underpinning and non-violence as well as its efficacy as a method of effect change. Cases in individual and groups have who have advocate nonviolence as a philosophy and method can be examined. Conflict resolution, transformation, and prevention. Students will learn productive ways of nonviolently resolving disputes and how they can apply them to their lives. They will continue to explore how a dispute that has been resolved can be turned into more favorable situations. Way to prevent conflicts can also be explored because of Galton had said, like in the medical field, it is better to prevent than remedy a situation that has gone wrong. Next, we have this human right. To have an integral understanding of human rights and to condemn all types of repression and discrimination based on values, race, and ethical gender and social status is necessary to learners, they should be encouraged practical to weak and powerless, to respect the dignity of all. Human solidarity, on the other hand, different religious, different religions, cultures, local and national groups are bound together by many similarities. Students should look at how interreligious, intercultural, and intergroup confidence can be improved. Next is we have the development based on justice. Learners can be made critically aware about the realities and tragic consequences of structural violence. Moving on, we have the democratization. It is important for learners to recognize that democracy offers an atmosphere in which the basic rights, interests, and desires of people are respected. Lastly, we have the sustainable development. Learners need to understand the interdependent relationship between human and natural environments, and understand the changes need to ensure the well-being of the ecosystem of the earth, so the future and present needs can continue to be met. The wisdom of our indigenous people have always respected nature must be rediscovered. Moving on to the attitudes and values, it is suggested that the following attitudes and values be cultivated. Firstly, we have the self respect. Having a sense of their own worth will enable them to contribute toward positive change. Respect for others, on the other hand, getting a sense of other people's worth and intrinsic integrity, especially those with a different socio-economic, religious, cultural, and family history than their own. Respect for life and nonviolence, valuing human life and refusing to react with violence to an opponent or conflict situations. Preference for peaceful mechanism such as problem solving and other constructive approaches towards the uses of physical force and weapons. Next, you have this gender equality, valuing women's freedom to enjoy equal opportunity as men and to be free of bullying, abuse, and harassment. Next, we have this compassion, sensitivity to other people's challenging situations and pain, and behavior with genuine concern and compassion for the other who are disadvantaged or excluded. Next, you have the global concern, caring for the entire human race that transcend or exceed their condition for their country or local ethical communities. Ecological concern, on the other hand, we have ecological concern, caring about the climate, preferring healthy lifestyle and simple existence, cooperating, valuing of mutual process, and the concept of working together to accomplish the shared objective. Next, you have the openness or tolerance, openness to the cycle of development, transformation, and ability to approach and receive with a constructive yet open mind the thought, belief, and perspective of other people, acknowledging the rich diversity of the technological practices, communities, and ways of speech of our world. Justice, acting with a sense of justice against all, following the principle of equality and opposing all forms of abuse and injustice. Social responsibility, on the other hand, willing, willingness to take steps to better form a society marked by justice, nonviolence, and well-being, a sense of responsibility to current and future generation. Positive vision. Lastly, we have this positive vision, imagining with a sense of optimism to sort the future they prefer and seeking its realization in ways only they can. Moving on to the skills, some of the skills that need to be developed are we have these reflections, critical thinking, decision making, imagination, communication, conflict resolution, empathy, and group building. So, defining all of these things, we have this reflection as first. Reflection, the use of reflective thinking or reasoning, through which they depend their understanding and themselves and their connectedness to other and to the living earth. We have next we have the critical thinking and analysis, the ability to discuss problem with an open yet analytical mind, ability to study, query, assess and understand facts, ability to identify and criticize perceptions and unjustified assertion, as well as to modify viewpoints in the face of evidence and logical arguments. We have this decision making, on the other hand, the ability to evaluate problems, formulate potential opinions, analyze alternative solutions that take into account benefits and drawbacks, add the ability to prepare a strategy for the exhaustion of the decision after arriving at the desired decision. Next, you have the imagination, development and creativity of alternative paradigms, and new favorite form of life and association. Next, we have this communication, listening closely and empathically, as well as being able to communicate thoughts and needs simply in a non-aggressive manner. Next, we have this conflict resolution, ability to evaluate disagreements in an analytical and systematic manner and to recommend the number of nonviolent solutions. Necessary assertiveness, dialogue, constructive listening, and constructive problem solving requires dispute resolution skills. In dispute resolution, communication skills are essential basic skills. Second to the last, we have this empathy, the desire to see another individual or group's point of view, to know what that person or group feels. It is, of course, putting yourself on the shoe of the other. It is an ability to help to expand the point of viewpoints of learners, especially in the quest for fair and positive alternatives. Lastly, we have this group building, the acting cooperatively, which with each other to accomplish shared aims. Cooperation and group building are encouraged by the participants' shared affirmation and supports. The idea is that everyone needs to contribute something, that everyone is part of the solution. So that is all for the chapter 2, the peace education as transformative education. Moving on to the chapter 3, we have the comprehensive scope of peace education. In this chapter, we will be talking about the different educations that has to be known by the people. Firstly, namely, we have this disarmament education, human right education, global education, conflict resolution education, multicultural education, education for international understanding, interfaith education, development education, gender fair, non sexist education, and lastly, we have this environmental education. Firstly, let's talk about disarmament education. What do we mean by that? Disarmament education involved at first as a reaction to the threat of nuclear weapons. In recent years of proliferation and misuse of small arms and light weapons have become a concern. 70% of expenditures and the annual global trade on conventional arm, estimated at $30 billion, are made by poor countries in the developing world. The Global Movement of International Action Network on a Small Arms, or IANSA, is raising awareness about the global threat of human rights and human security caused by small arms. Next, we have this human rights educations. Human rights education contribute to peace, says Betty Redden. Teachers are reminded that learning to uphold standards of human dignity and decency by students being and the teacher being begin with the teacher and how she teaches. HRE, or the Human Rights Education content, includes in the study of Universal Declaration in Human Right, human or the UDHR, in other important human rights documents. Moving on to the global education. The global education is defined as all programs, projects, studies, and activities that can help an individual learn and care about the world beyond his or her community. It enumerates three key themes perspective. Firstly, we have GE is human value centered. It affirms the core value of universal principle and the worth and dignity of human. Secondly, we have global education is world oriented. It involves understanding and identities as a member of globally independent social, ecological, social, system ecological, social, economic, and technological. Lastly, we have global education is future oriented. It is concerned with the creation of preferred future. Next, we have the conflict resolution education or the CRE. Conflict resolution education or the CRE appears to have gained momentum as an educational movement in the last 2 decades. The CRE is now in the curriculum of many schools and has educated learners about managing conflict constructively. The group, called the International Network for Conflict Resolution Education and Peace Education, is promoting CRE worldwide. CRE principles are now increasing being used in principal schools, communities, workplace, and government agencies. Next, we have this multicultural education. Multicultural education is an educational movement that has developed in the multicultural countries. Teaching with a multicultural perspective encourage an appreciation of other culture. It enables one to accept the uniqueness of the culture of others, attitudes towards one's own race and ethnic groups as well as other cultural groups begin to form early. So that is it for the multicultural education. Moving on to the education for international understanding or the EIU. The education for international understanding has taken a more holistic meaning, he says. It includes peace at the global level and building blocks of nonviolent, just and sustainable living in the other level of relationship. The dynamic work that is now being undertaken to promote EIU and a culture of peace has the participation of many schools or organizations. The interfaith education, on the other hand, began in 1893 at the World's Parliament of Religions gathered in Chicago. Organizers convened conference to address global problems of intolerance, injustice, and religious persecutions. Interfaith education was viewed as a morally and socially essential means to promoting countering discrimination and hate crimes. It aims to acquire an empathical understanding and other religions or faith traditions, so that all may live in a harmony and with respect. Next, we have this development education. In 1960s, development education emerged to challenge the mainstream model of development. Ian Harris described the goal of development education as building peaceful communities. It seeks to cultivate the learner and critical consciousness that challenges injustice and undemocratic structures. So let us now move to the gender faith or non-sexist education. The gender faith non-sexist education or the GFE seeks to foster respect for abilities and rights of both sexes, which is the male and female. Key concepts include the shared parenting, home management and decision making, and equal opportunities. The GFE expects that the learning content, method, and school environmenting will be gender fair. Lastly, we have the environmental education. Environmental education is an indication about, for, and through the education. EE is clearly an educational response to the ecological crisis. People's unsustainable ways of living and consuming needs to change. EE seeks to improve the people with knowledge, skills, and values that will enable them to live in a peace with Mother Earth. So that's it for the chapter Three, the comprehensive scope of peace education. Let us now move on to this spiritual chapter 4, which is the spiritual and faith traditions as resources for peace. Religious and faith traditions are essentially whispering and resources for peace. Writes author, comprehensive and faith traditions have now become imperative. We've got different religious here. Firstly, we have this Christianity. Next, we have Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and indigenous traditions. So, Christianity. Christian story begins with a song of the angel of this to the shepherd when Jesus was born. Glory to God in the highest and upon. Thus, from its inceptions, Christianity contained a concern for peace and earth. Islam, on the other hand, a Muslim is one who submits to God's will. The objective of this submission is a successful execution of divine plan. Mahmoud Abidin explains that five obligations of Muslims. First, we have the declaration and acceptance of the oneness of God, Tawheed, and the prophethood of Muhammad. The great significance of the Tawheed is that if God is one, so is all of his creations. Secondly, we have the prayer 5 times a day. Third, we have the payment of zakah or obligation charity, generally two and 2.5% of one's wealthy annually. Zakah in Islam is means to redistribute wealth to the to show one's concern for the other people. Fasting in month of Ramadan is mainly a spiritual exercise, but it also observes as a way for all Muslims to feel their solidarity. Pilgrimage to Mecca once in a lifetime, if one can afford to do so. Next religion we have this Buddhism. Via the eradication of defilements, Buddhism teaching urge inner purification before one reaches nirvana. The last liberation from suffering is nirvana, which is the culmination of oneself and death processes. It is important to resolve war, crime, and suffering by self-discipline, reflection, knowledge, and enlightenment. In one of his writings, Ethics of the New Millennium, the Dalai Lama in 1999 stressed the importance of following principles. Human nature is basically gentle and not aggressive. Next, we have the inner peace is the principal characteristic of happiness. Next, happiness is rooted in the concern of others, well-being and relationship with others. In one of his writings, Ethics for the New Millennium, the Dalai Lama in 1999 stressed the importance of the following principles. First, we have the human nature is basically gentle and not aggressive. Secondly, we have the inner peace is a principal characteristic of happiness. Third, we have happiness is rooted in concern for others' well-being and our relationship with others. Fourth, we have one should be non-harming and should be cultivate positive qualities such as generosity and humility. And lastly, we have the negative thoughts and feeling cause unhappiness and suffering. Next religion is we have this Hinduism. The ultimate aim of spirituality is to gain a non-discriminatory vision of harmony, where any kind of life form is essential. This vision of interconnectedness encourage profound mutual respect and healthy interactions between natural environment and human world. Vaswani in 2007 enumerates some of the important principles of Hinduism. First, we have live a moral life with the right thoughts and actions. Second, control one's desires and anger. Third, we have practice ahimsa, a non-violence or non-injury. Fourth, we have promote love and compassion as well as justice. Lastly, we have recognized that each person reaps the fruit of his or her deeds or karma. Or yeah. Lastly, we have this indigenous tradition. Among the many indigenous groups all over the world, there are some similarities in cultural and spiritual practices. One of these similarities are their spiritual connection with their land. They believe that no one owns the land but that the people of that land have the collective right to use it. She cites the responsive of Chief Settle, um, a leader of Native American Soquamish tribe, with when he was asked to sell tribal land in the U.S. government in 1854. How can you buy or sell the sky, warmth, or of the land? The idea is strange to us. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfume flower. In 2017, 92% of persons killed by explosive devices in urban areas were civilians. According to UNICEF, the civilian fatalities in wartime have climbed from 5% at turn of the century to more than 90% in war of the 1990s. So, peace education and the war system. Peace education seeks to teach the concept of oneness of human race. Education can help reduce conflicts, to enlarge the people social identifications. Most divisions are socially and cultural constructed rather. Difference are meant to enrich us, not divide us. Okay, so we really have to remember that. Mitigating the effects of war. The Huagu Appeal, the Hagu Appeal for Peace is a movement that started on the eve of our new century in May 1999. During the landmark meeting in the Hagu, the Global Movement for Peace Education was born. The International Red Cross Committee worked to support and help victims of armed conflict. Amnesty International as a multinational movement fighting for global recognized human resources. So that's it for the chapter 8, the challenging the war system. Moving on to the chapter 9, the resolving and transforming conflicts. What is conflict? Conflict comes from the term conflictus in Latin, which means attacking with force. Why do conflict arises in the first place? Territorial conflicts, racial and religious animosity, ideological and political battles, social inequalities, and the quest for statehood, trade, and market competitiveness, and economic resources dispute, among others, may be triggered at national or global levels. I mean, these are just example of the reasons why conflict arises. What prevents us from resolving conflicts? Well, people often display a lack of care and or involvement in the situation, whether purposely or not. In dispute resolution, the lack of coordination between deputants can also be hampering factor. It also takes a tremendous degree of confidence to dialogue with an opponent. Like, it is your pride that kills you. What is anger and its effects? Rage is a mixed sense of annoyance, fear, and anger that tells our body to brace for war. Like, in our for us now, it is our Satan. When we articulate it in a way that can cause harm, hate, and alienation, it can be harmful. During an angry change, it is not um, um, unusual to hear reports about people being killed or injured. Anger may have adverse impacts on our health as well. So, how do we express our anger? Well, that is simple. We can already communicate our emotion clearly when we have managed to put down the frustration thermometer and have cooled down. Of course, the proposal for how you should show your frustration in a non threatening manner are below. Firstly, we have described the behavior that angers you. Next, describe how you feel about the behavior. Thirdly, we have described the reason of your feeling. Okay, so you'll have to remember that. How do we deal with other people's anger? Well, according to Johans and Johnson in 1995, and FSR Associate provide some tips on how we can handle anger confrontation constructively. First, we have allow expression, listen. Second, do not counterattack. Third, stand on the shoe of the other. Help him or her to calm down. Fourth, paraphrase or clarify. Fifth, explain your situation. And lastly, look into opinions other. Look into opinions together. If you cannot deal with the other person's worth, ask for help because it is beyond your limitation as a person. What are the main options in dealing with conflicts? In dealing with conflicts, there are two variables that are normally considered by deputants. One is a relationship with the adversary, the other one is the importance of issues at hand. Below are some um, options options people choose from when they are faced in conflicts. First, just drive, stop on a case, or withdraw. Normally, this choice is selected when the dilemma is significant or when the woman is in dispute feels that she has no ability to improve the situation. Okay. Secondly, we have shift against or win the fight. Where the problem is relevant, the group agrees that she is right and is determined to show that, or he or she has the ability to attain his or her aims with this decision is made. Third, just give up or give in. Okay? This declaration is made where the global is not established peace in the relationship. When the other side acknowledges the importance of the other's point of view, it is often taken. Like it is very much likely to get accommodated. Fourth, we have only give half in the only give half Fourth, is they only give half in this center, meet that choice and accomplishment because the sides are unwillingly to complemently get what they want and are prepared to give up part of their priorities, like compromise. And lastly, we have move towards dialogue or collaborate with your adversary. This option is taken when both issue and relationship are important to the parties. Hence, a mutually accepted solution is sought. Phase or collaboration, so most likely a mediation process. Okay, what are the main options in dealing conflicts? Well, what are some tips to a good dialogue? Well, I have 9 tips here. Firstly, we have speak in gentle, not threatening manner. Second, think carefully of what you are going to say. Do not make the situation worse by angering the other person. Third, use the I image. Begin your sentence with I to illustrate how you feel about the situation. You you messages tend to be blaming or re reapproachful. Okay, fourth, admit your own responsibility to the conflict. Will soften will soften often or otherwise potential position stance. Fifth, we have avoid using hasty statements and global words such as always and never. Be as specific as possible. Okay. Six, we have be willing to tell the other person his or her positive attributes. Okay, so you really have to commend them. You have to commend them. This will help create an atmosphere of trust and openness. Okay, that is very clear. Show positive and regard and respect. Show positive regard and respect. Do not call names, blame, humiliate, characterize, or judge. Remember, you are the one who has to solve the problem, so you really have to be cautious about these stuffs. Okay. Eight, do not give into the temptation of returning hurt for hurt. As Gandhi had said, an eye for an eye will make the world blind. Okay. Instead, paraphrase, clarify, and explain your situation. And lastly, be tough on the problems, not on the person. Okay. Make it clear that it is with the behavior or ideas that you disagree with, not the person themselves. Okay. So let's talk about these listening tips. Actively listen. That is very number one. That really has to be in the top. Actively listen. Show that you are hearing his or her point of view. Second, we have listen with empathy and try to stand on the shoe of the other. Emphatic. Okay. Third, accept criticism of your ideas or behavior. This does not mean rejection of you as a person. Fourth, which is the last, we have paraphrase and clarify when needed. Collaborating tips, on the other hand, we have state your needs or interest, not your demands. Okay, you supposed to solve the problem. You're not going to like demand or something. Second, deal with the issues one at a time. Okay, hindi sabay-sabay. Third, state repeatedly your positive intention to solve the problems for you to be able to remind the deputants. Fourth, we have be solution oriented. Prepare realistic proposal for a solution, not for the solution that are good and fair for both of sides. I mean, there's a lot of mediators out there that are words were just so good to be true. So I mean that's it for the chapter 9, the resolving and transforming conflicts. On to the chapter 10, the sharing the earth resources. I only got one major focus in this chapter. The causes of poverty. That I mean poverty is a cancer of our community, the society, the nation, and that is why it is very crucial nowadays. So let us talk about its causes. So, what other factor explain this inequality? Historians, political scientists, and peace educators, among others, have offered explanations for this phenomenon. The cause of frequent pointed to are as follows. First, armed conflict disrupts the people's livelihood and all productive activities. Globally the economic impacts of violence to the global econom, economy was 13.6 trillion dollar in 2015. The economic cost of the war in Mindanao would amount 10 billion peso annually. Okay. power structures built by local political and by profit driven economic system that minimize the ability to most individuals to gain enough to satisfy their power structures built by local political insiders paired with profit driven economic system that minimize the ability to for most individuals to gain enough to satisfy their functions fundamental needs. Next, we have decolonization has had detrimental consequences on the economic conditions of colonized countries. The indigenous people in the Philippines have traditionally been sustaining. But over the years, injustice staring with colonization have damaged their self-sufficiency. Next, we have the environmental situation. Some countries are provided with opportunities that are more plentiful. The reason why we do have a lot of overseas Filipino workers, while others have to compete with land that does not grow crops. Okay, overuse of capital, coral reefs have been destroyed, trees have been logged, and farm yields have lost a lot of topsoils due to past generation of over applications of pesticides causing decreased yields. We also have the lack of opportunities such as employments. We also have the lack of educations. We also have these very huge problems of our community, society, that really causes a lot, that really affects the poverty. We have this corruption. Next is we have the overconsumption, knowing that our population is really um knowing that our population is now numerous. And last, we have the greed. So that is it for the chapter 10, the sharing of the earth's resources. Moving on to the chapter 11, the carrying the earth. The same thing with chapter 10. I only have one thing to discuss here, which is the environmental concern. Air pollution occurs when the contains gases, fumes, dust, or odors in dangerous amounts. Water pollution, on the other hand, is the contamination of water with harmful chemicals or other foreign substances. Vector-borne diseases account for more than 17% of all infectious diseases, causing more than 700,000 deaths annually. Deforestation is a destruction of forests due to the logging, land and clearing, and the Land Convention. Deforestation, the pertaining the per- deforestation pertains to the gradual loss of soil productivity due to human activities. That's just it. Chapter 11, carrying the earth. Lastly, we have this chapter 12, the last topic of the day. We have the cultivating inner self. So, culti- um, in cultivating inner self, we have two focus here: the inner and outer transformation, and what inner peace entails. Okay, inner and outer transformation transition, says Patricia Meshi, are inseparable pieces of one whole. This is a growing agreement that our inner state and what we do in our outer realms have an emotional relations. Inner peace entails, on the other hand, having inner peace is characterized by self-respect and recognition of one's own dignity as a humankind, as a human being. Forgiveness frees and hearts and put a stop to the exchange of negative energies and intentions. Right, Jinglin? Um, teach not like teach not um writes Jinglin. Teach not handholds that a key to world peace is the practice of being peace. He says that if we cultivate the seeds of compassion, we nourish peace within us and around us. Whatever his points, whatever, however, he points out that many influences of contemporary society nurture instead of seeds of violence. The Dalai Lama in 2001 explains that a calm of and wholesome state of mind has beneficial effects in our health. Okay, Dalai Lama, peace not just the absence of violence, but also but also, but also involves the satisfactions, happiness, and tranquility. It is an expression of compassion and caring, all life without fear. Inner peace and outer peace feeds each other. We cannot say that we have inner peace while ignoring violent realities all around us. Okay, so as we cultivate inner peace, we also need to nurture our aspiration and efforts to contribute social peace. And that is it for this video. I hope everything is clear, knowing that I only said um, things that are has to be highlighted in this peace education summary analysis. Once again, this is Jufali A. Jamalol, your BS Public Administration student, and have a great day.